Hi, I'm Kat and today I have for you a true crime case, a word in Romanian, and of course I'll be doing my makeup at the same time. So, the word for today is gheață. 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 Well done guys, you just said ice. And before we get started, just a very quick disclaimer, I'm really sorry but I'm going to be butchering so many names today. I tried my best, okay, to learn the pronunciation. I tried my best, but this is the best I can do. In a country known for its low murder rate, the killing of a young woman shook the nation. Reykjavik, the capital of Iceland, is home to Laugavegur, the main shopping street. Originally, this street was used by women carrying laundry from the town to the nearby thermal springs. This street runs from west to east with the Atlantic Ocean below and the imposing Hallgrimskirkja church above, resembling a tower from Tolkien's Middle-earth. Birna Briandottir, a vibrant 20-year-old with red hair and a really great sense of humor, was familiar with this street. She grew up in the suburbs, just a 30-minute walk away. Birna enjoyed listening to music ranging from, hip-hop to folk, anything really, and she loved driving. So during the summer of 2016, she joined the Icelandic tradition of rundtur, which is just leisurely cruising down Laugavegur with her friends. They would just roll down the windows, blast music from the speakers, and pass by the various boutiques, coffee bars, and tourist shops selling adorable puffin plush toys and knitted sweaters. So it was winter and the sun was only out for a few hours a day, but Birna, she really loved the nightlife in Laugavegur. Every Friday after work she would meet up with her friends at a pub for some fun card games, and when midnight hit, it was time to hit the lively party scene in Reykjavik. On January 13, 2017, they danced the night away at Hura, a popular club and live music venue. Birna was feeling confident and so carefree, so she stayed even after her friends called it a night at 2 a.m. Finally, when the club was about to close, Birna left with a falafel pita in hand and she took a stroll down the brightly lit Laugavegur. This was a really great lit street, okay? This street was full of shops and bars and clubs and everything was very well lit. She was just walking by herself, which is quite normal in Reykjavik, even for a young woman. Unlike other countries, Icelanders think that they know everyone in their city and it's usually really safe there. I'm sure that you very rarely hear about any true crime cases from Iceland. It was freezing cold outside, like -9 degrees Celsius with a wind chill, but Birna didn't really seem bothered by it. She had on her regular black Dr. Martens boots, not her knee-high ones with the glow-in-the-dark skeleton on the side, which she proudly owned. She was wearing black jeans, a grey sweater, and had a black hoodie draped over her shoulders. Her hair was down and she had white earbuds hanging around her neck. She was also, a bit drunk, dropping some coins and accidentally bumping into a stranger on the street. She went past the Lebowski bar, which was inspired by the movie The Big Lebowski by the Coen brothers, and the coffee and waffle shop on a corner where there was a small alley which was leading towards the sea. And then, just like that, Birna just disappeared. She just completely vanished. So when Birna didn't show up for work on Saturday morning, her friend Maria totally freaked out. Birna was always on time, so this was really unlike her. They both worked in the fashion department at the Housekeep department store and they've been friends since they were little kids. They used to hang out together and watch Britain's Got Talent and go to music festivals together. Anyway, Maria, she tried calling Birna's phone, but the phone was completely switched off. Birna's phone is never off, again, completely unlike her character. Maria then contacted the friends Birna was with the night before, thinking that, she might have just gone back to her dad's place where she usually stays. But there was no luck, because Birna wasn't there. Finally, Maria decided to call Birna's mom, Sila Hreinsdottir. Understandably, Sila got really worried when she heard the news. You see, Birna, she was really independent and strong-willed, but she was also responsible, and she always made sure that her parents knew where she was. That evening, after reporting Birna as a missing person, Sila took to Facebook to ask for help. She posted a message saying that her daughter hadn't come home or been in touch since her night out. Sila reached out to their friends, begging them to share the message and help find Birna. Within a few hours, the post had been shared thousands of times, but there was no word from Birna. Her mother stayed awake all night, calling the emergency services every hour, sometimes even every half an hour, to see if they had any news. At 9 a.m. on Sunday, there was an update from the police. Before Birna's phone was turned off or ran out of power at 5:50 a.m. the day before, it pinged a mobile tower in an industrial area in Hafnarfjordos, a port town 6 miles south of Reykjavik, known for its lava fields and Viking festival. Birna's mom Sila drove there with some relatives and several of her daughter's friends, knocking on doors and calling Birna's name. By the early afternoon, Sila was freaking out. She really was. Her daughter had been missing for 36 hours and she was convinced that something really messed up was going on. But the police didn't want to do anything without proof of foul play. Luckily, the media caught wind of the story and both of the big TV stations asked Sila for interviews. So now everyone knows about the young woman who disappeared from the most famous street in Reykjavik. Some really crazy stuff, right? Especially for Iceland. With a population of just over 372,000 in 2021 and everyone being pretty much the same, Iceland is like one of those super safe places. It's unique because it's the only NATO member that doesn't have an army. People own a lot of guns, around 90,000, but they mainly use these guns for hunting, not for defending themselves. And guess what? Violence is actually very rare there. Between 2000 and 2015, there were only around 1.6 murders per year. And get this, in 2008, there weren't any homicides at all. In 2021, homicide rate for Iceland was 0.5 cases per 100,000 population. So I think it's safe to say that this was a safe place. This was a safe country, a safe city, a safe street. The police, they don't even carry guns. And if you check their Instagram accounts, they are just, chilling, eating ice cream and taking selfies. Icelanders love looking out for each other, which goes way back to when they had to team up to survive those super harsh winters. Okay, so this detective, Grimur Grimson, was home just relaxing with his wife, eating dinner and not watching TV, otherwise he would have seen the news, when he got a call from his boss about this missing young woman. Then police headquarters in Reykjavik called him as well. His 3 decades in the police force weren't really all about, just eating ice cream. Back in the 90s, he was stationed up north in the Westfjords region near the Arctic Circle when a bunch of avalanches came crashing down, taking more than 30 lives. Then, in early 2009, when the financial crash hit, he went on board with the Special Prosecutor's Office and spent 6 years going after the managers and traders who messed with the market and pulled off shady loans, which eventually caused Iceland's 3 biggest banks to go belly up. Finally, in November 2016, he decided that he missed the fast-paced action of regular police work and he rejoined the Reykjavik force. That Sunday evening, as he drove to the police station, Grimur didn't really have much reason to be worried. People go missing in Iceland all the time, whether it's hunters and hikers in the harsh wilderness, young people running away from home or caught up in drugs, people dealing with mental health issues or Alzheimer's, or even victims of suicide. Usually in the city, missing young people return home quite quickly. They've crashed at their friend's place, just like Birna often did with her girlfriends, or maybe they are just spending the night with someone new. So Grimur went to the police headquarters near Laugavegur and got all the details about the case. Police have taken some of Birna's clothing from her dad's place to give the tracker dogs her scent. They took the dogs to where she was last seen. Reykjavik doesn't have as many CCTVs as other European capitals because crime rates are low and people aren't really too keen on being watched all the time. They like to keep an eye on things themselves. Usually people say nothing bad ever happens there when they talk about preparing for terrorist attacks or dealing with crime. But the police officers, they managed to find some blurry footage that showed what Birna did after leaving the club on Saturday morning. Grimur watched as she dropped some coins and she ran into a stranger before walking past the Lebowski bar. But when they looked at the next camera's footage, just 1 block away, Birna was nowhere to be seen. She either went down a side road or got into a passing car. When they checked the video again, Grimur and his friends saw a small red car, a Kia Rio, going the opposite way from Birna. It passed by the Lebowski bar in under 30 seconds. At 2 a.m. on Sunday night, Sila and Birna's dad, Brian, who are divorced but still get along with each other, showed up at the police headquarters. Sila was begging them to take her seriously and to do an immediate search. She was sure that there was no reason for Birna to disappear. They were a tight-knit family and Birna wasn't into drugs or she wasn't feeling down, being depressed. One of her friends even called her a happy pill because she was always so positive. Money wasn't a concern either. Birna's job at the department store paid more than enough according to what she told her mom. What really mattered to Birna was time. Time spent with loved ones and doing the things that she loved. When Grimur played them the CCTV footage, Sila got really upset that they couldn't make out the red car's license plate. She even said, "Can't you find it like they do in the movies?" But Grimur said that it just doesn't work like that. So in Iceland, it's not exactly true that, everybody knows everybody, but if you mention one Icelander to another, chances are they will know someone who knows them. They have this strong belief that every person is important to the community and when someone needs help, they step up. People do a lot of voluntary stuff there, like singing in choirs or organizing sports teams, which makes them feel important, even though it's not always helpful, but it can be really fun. Anyway, on Monday afternoon, the police held a press conference asking for help to find Birna or to identify the driver of the red car. Sila, Birna's mom, felt that the police didn't take her seriously, but she still showed up at the conference. She told reporters that she was worried her daughter might have stopped to talk to tourists on her way home because she loved speaking English and traveling. She also mentioned that Birna had recently joined Tinder after breaking up with her boyfriend. The search for Birna was being led by the Icelandic Association for Search and Rescue, also known as ISAR, a team of well-trained volunteers. They've been around for 100 years because the biggest dangers in Iceland actually come from nature and not from people. Usually having regular citizens help in searches is a problem because they don't really know what they are doing and they might tamper with potential evidence. But a few hours after the press conference, two brothers in their 20s who had no connection to ISAR, the search and rescue team, or Birna, decided to look for her in Hafnarfjordos, where the last signal from her phone was picked up. They went to the harbor and found some boots which matched the description of Birna's clothing and what the boots she was wearing. They posted a picture on Facebook and the police quickly confirmed that the boots indeed belonged to Birna. As the divers were diving into the freezing waters and drones were hovering above, the officers were busy going through the CCTV footage from the docks. They quickly spotted a red Kia Rio entering the harbor at around 6 a.m. on Saturday morning. The car was parked next to a 65-meter fishing trawler called the Polar Nanok, which was sailing under Greenland's flag. A guy stumbled out of the passenger door and walked unsteadily onto the ship. The car then drove away. This time they could read the number plate. It turns out that the car was rented by a crew member of the Polar Nanok named Thomas Möller Olsen, a 25-year-old guy from Greenland. He returned the car at lunchtime on Saturday and he was rented out to a young family afterwards. So the police took the car into custody. And it was clear that the car has recently been cleaned. The family's kid in the back seat even complained about, about the strong chemical smell. On closer inspection, they found traces of blood on the back seat. Police has also confirmed that the damage to the rental car points to it having been driven on rough trails not intended for small compact cars. The damage to the car caused the police to suspect that the car might have been driven on rough paths in the lava fields on Reykjavik's peninsula. Since Iceland doesn't have a fancy forensic lab, they sent blood samples to Sweden along with Birna's DNA for analysis. The hunt was on for Thomas Olsen and the guy who walked from the car to the ship on Saturday morning. Unfortunately, the trawler had already set sail on Saturday afternoon with both men on board. By Tuesday, 3 days after Birna went missing, the Polar Nanok was fishing far away off the coast of Greenland. Since leaving Iceland, Thomas Olsen and his car companion Nikolaj Olsen had been acting normal. By the way, they are not related even though they share the same last name. But then Thomas, he actually received a message on his phone which made him visibly anxious. A journalist in Reykjavik found out about the Polar Nanok's connection to Birna's disappearance and sent Thomas a speculative message through a Facebook group used by the crew asking if he knew who rented the red Kia Rio. Thomas turned pale and he showed the captain the journalist's message. The captain assured him that he had nothing to worry about if he hadn't done anything wrong and gave him some sedatives. For Grimur's team, the detective, capturing the two sailors was proving to be quite a challenge, logistically and diplomatically as well. They flew 4 police officers on a Coast Guard helicopter to a Danish warship called the Triton. Since the Polar Nanok was a Greenlandic vessel in Greenland's waters, The plan was to sail to Greenland, which is an autonomous territory of Denmark, and gather local police officers there. They would then go to the Polar Nanok and make the arrests. Grimur was worried about time because the longer the suspects were on the run, the more chances they had to destroy evidence and coordinate their stories. Then Grimur received some news that made things easier and faster. The captain of the Polar Nanok had read online that the ship was linked to the disappearance, and he was concerned that his crew might be implicated, so he decided to sail back to Iceland. He and the senior crew agreed to tell Thomas and Nikolaj that there was an engine malfunction and that's why they were heading back. The captain also turned off the Wi-Fi so the two men couldn't read any media reports about the case. Iceland doesn't actually have any kind of special forces, but they do have an elite counter-terror unit in the police called the Viking Squad. Early the next morning, 6 members of the Viking Squad went on a helicopter and flew out to meet the Polar Nanok as it entered Icelandic waters. Despite the bad weather and the rough sea, the officers safely went onto the deck. Thomas and Nikolaj were arrested and confined to their cabins. In 12 hours, the Polar Nanok would reach Hafnarfjordos. The whole of Iceland was following the story with a growing sense of worry. Parents who had never had to explain crime dangers to their children struggled to answer their questions about the missing woman and the sailors. People in cafes and bars in Reykjavik were constantly checking news websites for updates and sharing their theories about what happened. This case was unfolding like a plot from the popular noir novels in Iceland. Helgi Gunnlaugsson, a sociology professor at the University of Iceland, said, quote, "It represented the scariest fear in our society. A young, innocent woman targeted in a downtown area, and then the suspects were outsiders. That only made it worse," end of quote. The public reaction was mostly well-intentioned, with people passing on potential clues to the police and showing empathy for Birna's family. The National Broadcasting Service even postponed the airing of a TV show out of respect. But with so many people playing detectives, rumors started to spread online. The night before, officers had been sent to clear up reports on social media that a body had been found in a lake. Now there were fresh speculations that Birna was alive on the Polar Nanok and that other abducted women were also on board. The police urged people to stay calm and avoid mob fever. As the Polar Nanok approached, the harbor was sealed off to keep the public away. The port was covered in snow, and ICESAR volunteers quietly continued their search for evidence. At around 11 p.m. on Wednesday night, Viking Squad officers let Thomas and Nikolaj off the ship in handcuffs. After days of bad news, Icelanders finally had some kind of relief. The arrested men, being foreigners, brought some extra level of comfort to some. The police convoy rushed to the headquarters, where questioning began immediately. Forensic tests revealed that the blood in the car belonged to Birna, but both men, interviewed separately, denied causing her any kind of harm. Their accounts of what happened that night were similar. The Polar Nanok had arrived from Denmark on January 11, 2017, and a few of the men on board decided to go for a night out before heading back out to the sea. Nikolaj took a taxi to Reykjavik and went for a drink in a pub. He played the game and won 8 beers. By the time Thomas joined him, Nikolaj was already very drunk. They later went on to another bar and ended up on Laugavegur, where the red Kia Rio was captured on CCTV. At the same time, Birna disappeared. Both men claimed that 2 women went into their car, although Nikolaj didn't remember anything about them. Thomas told the police that he dropped Nikolaj off at the ship and then drove around with the 2 women, one of whom was Birna, whom he claimed to have kissed. He said he dropped the women off at a nearby roundabout after an hour. Nikolaj's lack of detail seemed plausible because he was drunk, but Thomas's account had a lot of inconsistencies. At 7 a.m. on Saturday, when he was seen driving away from the harbor, his phone was off for 4 hours. The car wasn't seen on surveillance footage until 11 a.m. and Thomas claimed he slept in the car during that time. However, the odometer reading suggested that he took a long drive. Later, he was seen buying cleaning supplies and scrubbing the inside of the car. He said that he was trying to remove vomit from the back seat, but when the car was impounded, forensic officers found bloodstains using luminol, a chemical that detects blood even if it has been cleaned. Other evidence like scratches on Thomas's chest and finding Birna's driver license in the ship's rubbish pointed towards him being responsible for Birna's disappearance. However, they still didn't find Birna. A week after she went missing, the largest search operation in Iceland's history began. Hundreds of volunteers and numerous vehicles were deployed. People were anxiously waiting for updates as the search covered Iceland's southern peninsula. The Icelandic search and rescue units mounted the largest missing person search in their history. In addition to the police and the Coast Guard, at least 570 members of ISAR participated in the search. Since the search began, 685 members of ISAR with 11 tracking dogs participated from 71 different search and rescue units and 50 different marine rescue units from around Iceland. 775 volunteers participated in the search, which covered 7,000 kilometers or 4,350 miles of shoreline and roads. On Sunday, a Coast Guard helicopter flying low over the coastline spotted something. It was Birna's body near the water's edge. Very soon, sadness replaced shock. Memorials were held in Greenland, in Denmark, and all the main cities in Iceland. In Reykjavik, thousands of people walked together down Laugavegur, leaving candles and flowers at the spot where Birna disappeared. Her funeral was held at Hallgrimskirkja, the biggest church in the country, with the president and the prime minister among the 2,000 mourners. Birna's friends carried the white coffin. The songs included two that she had introduced to her mother in her last months. Jerry Rafferty's Right Down the Line and You by English musician Keaton Hansen. For weeks, Birna's mother was just too devastated to hear the details of how her daughter died. In March, she actually asked to meet with Grimur and the chief of Reykjavik Metropolitan Police to give her some closure and told her what they knew. Even though Birna was found naked, there was no evidence of sexual assault. She was struck in the face and strangled. Police believed that it happened at the harbor when Thomas was seen on camera entering the back of the car before his phone was turned off. He then drove away from the port, but Birna was actually alive when she was placed in the water. The autopsy revealed that the cause of death was drowning. Nicholas had been released after being in custody for 2 weeks when police concluded that he wasn't present when the crime was committed. Nicholas Olsen was a vital witness in the prosecution's case. He was in the car when they picked Birna. We don't know how Birna got into the car, but Nicholas testified that he fell asleep on the way to Hafnarfjordur, and when Thomas dropped him off at the Polarnanok, there was someone in the back seat. Nicholas also said that in the days following their shore leave in Reykjavik, Thomas tried to confuse him about what happened in the car after Birna got in. Nicholas's memory was patchy, but he knew that he never harmed anyone. None of Nicholas's clothes had any blood or evidence connecting him to Birna's attack. With all the evidence against him, Thomas didn't confess. He stuck to the same story through 9 police interviews. Police still had no idea why Birna got in his car on Laugavegur or why he killed her. In court, when his trial began in August, Thomas Müller Olsen changed his original story of making out with Birna and another girl after dropping Nikolaj off. This time he placed the blame of what happened to Birna wholly on Nikolaj. Thomas said that the drunken Nikolaj harassed women all night. He met up with him outside the English pub they went to, the American bar, where Nikolaj's misogynistic behavior continued. Thomas went his own way, but Nikolaj found him again and asked for a ride back to the Polar Nanok. According to Thomas, Birna got into the car and spoke in Icelandic. He tried to explain to her that the car was not a taxi, but she didn't seem to understand. She didn't want to get out and he thought that she might need help, so he left it at that. In this version, there was only one woman, Birna, not two, as in his initial story. Thomas said that they drove to Hafnarfjordur, where he pulled over and got out to take a leak. While he was doing so, he saw Nikolaj moving in behind the steering wheel. This is Thomas's account. Quote, "Then I see that he drives off away from me and I'm not sure how long he was gone for. I didn't have my phone with me. I was just looking at the stars. Then Nikolaj came back and was alone. I asked him where she was and he told me that her home had been close by and that she had decided to walk back." End of quote. Thomas said that he then dropped Nikolaj at the Polar Nanok and drove into the industrial area nearby. He found a secluded spot where he pulled over and slept until 11 a.m. However, this version of events contradicts all the evidence. Nikolaj was in no state to drive, he was too drunk. In fact, he was barely conscious at that point. In court, Nikolaj said, "I doubt that I could have driven the car. I doubt that I spoke to Birna because I had fallen asleep in the car. If I had driven the car in my condition, we would probably have had an accident. I was so very drunk. I don't have a license and no experience driving." Cell phone evidence showed that Nikolaj tried calling the bartender after he was dropped off 3 more times before 7 a.m. According to Nikolaj, he fell asleep and woke up around 11 a.m. He went looking for Thomas, but he wasn't in his cabin. Thomas came back after 11:30 with another crew member's jacket. This sailor caught a ride into Reykjavik that night and left his jacket on the back seat of the Kia. He was confused when Thomas returned a damp jacket the next morning and said that he had cleaned it. CCTV footage from a local store showed Thomas buying cleaning products, specifically car cleaning products. If you would rent a car for one night, you wouldn't really have to clean it before returning it. Thomas insinuated that Nikolaj vomited in the car, also on their friend's jacket, and he had to clean it. However, forensic testing of the car ruled out that anyone had vomited. When asked why there were traces of Birna's blood in the car, Thomas couldn't explain it. In fact, Birna's blood was also on Thomas's jacket found on the Polar Nanok. His DNA was found on the shoelaces of Birna's Doc Martens and his fingerprints were on her driver's license. Birna's blood was also on the other crew member's jacket, the one that he had washed. Witnesses confirmed that the man left the jacket in Thomas's rental car that night. Thomas switched off his cell phone at 7 a.m. that morning for 4 hours. He drove 300 kilometers, cleaned the car and then returned it. When he was examined after his arrest, Thomas had scratch marks on his chest. Doctors who examined him after his arrest on 18th of January estimated that the scratches were made 4 to 6 days before, exactly when Birna was killed. But Thomas claimed that he scratched himself in his sleep. The prosecution laid out their case against Thomas Olsson. He was an assertive, sometimes aggressive man with a criminal past. Back in 2011, in his home of Greenland, he was accused of rape. A young woman woke up in her own bed after a night out with Thomas forcing himself on her. She had a lot to drink and was unable to fight him off. She reported the incident the following morning and had herself examined. Thomas's DNA was found, but he claimed that the sex was consensual. A friend of his backed him up, claiming that he heard the woman inviting Thomas into her room. In this he said, she said case, Thomas Olsson was eventually acquitted. But this gave the prosecution in Birna's case some insight into his past. Because there was no clear motive for the attack, the assumption was that Birna rejected Thomas's sexual advances and he just snapped. Based on evidence, the prosecution could reveal what happened to Birna Briandottir on Saturday morning, the 14th of January 2017. After dropping Nikolaj off at the Polar Nanok, Thomas and Birna drove to a secluded spot with no CCTV cameras near the location where her shoes were found. Once he was sure that there were no witnesses, he attacked her, beating her repeatedly in the head and face, so forceful that the attack broke her nose. Then he strangled her. She was most likely rendered unconscious inside the car between 6:10 and 7 a.m. When Birna passed out, Thomas panicked and put a plan in motion to dispose of her body. He switched off his phone and drove along the shoreline to find a place to throw her into the sea, somewhere he wouldn't be seen. Once he decided on the location, he took off all of Birna's clothing, threw her body into the icy ocean at Voxos estuary, her place for 8 days, until she washed up near Selvoksviti lighthouse. Tragically, Birna's cause of death was drowning. She was still alive when she was thrown into the ocean. His defense argued that Thomas had a shoulder injury that would have prevented him from carrying out such a brutal attack and carrying Birna's body to the water's edge. However, a medical examination after his arrest concluded that Thomas was physically fit and strong and would have been able to overpower a female of Birna's size. A month later, the 3 judges convicted Thomas of both charges of murder and drugs possession and sentenced him to 19 years in prison. Thomas appealed his conviction, asking the court for an independent assessor to analyze whether it was possible for him to have disposed of Birna's body given the ocean currents and the mileage on the rental car. His appeal was rejected and he wasn't allowed any more appeals. He was also required to pay Birna's family 7 million kronur, around $66,000 in damages, as well as 28 million kronur, $264,000, to cover legal costs. In October 2019, Thomas was transferred to Denmark to serve out the remainder of his sentence. It's not uncommon for Iceland to send prisoners to their home countries to serve out their sentences. As a citizen of Greenland, Thomas Olsen holds a Danish passport, and Greenland, with an open prison system, usually sends serious offenders to serve their time behind lock and key in the higher security prisons of Denmark. 25-year-old Thomas Møller Olsen had a criminal record in Greenland, having been arrested for selling drugs. He was suspected of involvement in the smuggling of drugs found on board the Polar Nanok. A 4th man was also arrested after police discovered the large amounts of drugs on board. This was being investigated as a separate case. According to police, at least 20 kilograms or 44 pounds of pressed hashish blocks with a street value of at least 228 million kronur or $2 million or 1.9 million euro was found on board of the ship. Nikolaj, his crewmate, doesn't have a criminal record and he was cleared by the police in Birna's murder as well. The biggest effect of Birna's murder may be on the national mindset in Iceland. The murder coincided with a period of strong economic growth driven by outside forces, a tourism boom, an influx of migrants to take up low-level jobs, and foreign investment. Grimur, the detective, moved on from the first and possibly only murder case that he will ever lead. Birna's murder turned him into a hero in Iceland. He is now based in The Hague as Iceland's representative at the EU's Agency for Law Enforcement Cooperation. Grimur was proud of the investigation, but he wished forces had been quicker to respond to Sila's desperation for the search of her daughter. Sila didn't attend the trial and she later made an appeal in the media for people not to refer to the murder as the Birna case. She said that Birna was a beautiful soul and she did not deserve this. Her focus now is keeping the positive memory of her daughter alive. Birna had often talked about moving to the US to train as a professional makeup artist for films and the theater. Sila would often watch the videos that Birna recorded and uploaded to her YouTube channel, miming to rap songs, doing crazy dances. Birna also had a cat, Dreki or Dragon, who she loved dearly and always defended despite its habit of terrorizing the other family members and her friends. Sila also said that although she is grateful for all the public support, she rejected an idea to have an annual memorial day in Birna's name to promote unity and dismisses the notion that some good has resulted from the tragedy. Quote, "There was no purpose in this. It makes me crazy when people talk about the country coming together. It's a fantasy. This beautiful country in the frozen north where everybody comes together. I don't think it's healthy for Iceland to think of itself as special in that way." End of quote. And honestly, I agree. I can accept Sila not wanting her daughter to be called just Birna, just the Birna case, and I respect that, and out of respect I am not going to title my video that way. However, knowing that this information is public, I kind of have quite a lot of negative feelings around the other YouTubers who have covered Birna's case, and quite clearly they've added this exact same keywords in the YouTube title, the video title, specifically against Sila's wishes, you know. I mean, it's not that you are legally liable. I mean, it's not that you are legally required not to use certain words if the family of a victim asks you to, or asks the public in general to. But I think that out of respect, if you have been researching a case and you have a family member who specifically requests not to refer to Birna as just Birna's case, then I think you should kind of respect that. And yes, and as I was doing my research and I was reading this, and I kept coming across so many articles and YouTube videos and the blog posts and so on, and everybody was referring to Birna as the Birna case, even though her mom clearly doesn't want Birna to be known that way, to be remembered that way, just the Birna case, you know. Do you get what I mean? Anyway, I think that now we should remember how Birna was like. Born on November 28, 1996, Birna was only 20 years old when she was killed. Described as a kind, fun-loving redhead with a great sense of humor, she was outgoing but sensible. She loved talking to a variety of people. She wanted to be able to say that she had conversations with people from every country in the world. Friends and family were very important to Birna, and she was just a lovely person to know. She loved all kinds of music, she had a good sense of humor, and enjoyed sharing a laugh with friends. She was just someone that made everyone feel good about themselves. Because of Birna's death, young women are now more careful when they are out at night in Iceland. As a result, the Facebook group offering car rides around the country has become less active than it used to be, and instead, a sister group has been created specifically for women. Before Birna's disappearance, the argument against additional surveillance cameras was a hot topic in Iceland, but quickly diminished after the murder. This led to more security cameras in the area to protect its citizens and prevent anything like this from ever happening again. And guys, this is the tragic story of Birna. It's so sad that Birna felt she was safe in a country with almost non-existent murders, and a fun night out ended in tragedy for her. The police also could have done much more only if they would have listened to Birna's mom and started the search much earlier. Maybe Birna could even have been saved. Thank you guys so much for staying with me today. Please do let me know what do you think in the comment section under the video. For now, stay safe, take care, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!